What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we have another very exciting deck tech video for you. We're going to be talking about a crazy hyper aggro list. This list is running 22 uninkables, which sounds a little mental, but the highest cost card in the deck is 4, and the average cost per card is 2.2. So very, very low curve on the deck. Better chances of getting 2 1-drops on turn 2 than necessarily hitting a 2-drop, which is kind of crazy. The deck is going to allow you to draw some cards to continue to fuel your board, so it's a really kind of interesting list. It is on the traditional colors. It's nice to be back to those and have something that I feel like plays pretty well. The matchup into Steel Song can be a little bit awkward at times if they get a good hand and you get a bad one, but if you get a hand that plays into them well, you can still do quite good. They have a hard time with Daisy Duck in the early turns, and they have a pretty high chance of hitting non-character cards when they flip because of all the songs in their deck. That being said, as always, big shout out to the Patreons for making giveaways on the channel possible. You guys are the real MVPs. I need to get that Patreon exclusive giveaway drawing done, so that is going to be happening. Stay tuned for that coming later today, and appreciate your patience with getting that drawing actually pulled, but hope you guys enjoy the prizes all the same. If you haven't had a chance to check out the Patreon, now is a great time to do so. It is going to be your last opportunity to get entered into that giveaway. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about today's deck list, Hyper Aggro. So the first card we're playing, and I really think this is going to be a new Amethyst staple, is going to be Diablo Obedient Raven, a 1-cost inkable character, 0/1 stat line. So it's not dealing any damage like something like Turnipbox Followers or Magic Brooms, but it is questing for 1, and it is guaranteeing you that card draw with the ability when this character is banished, you may draw a card. The chances of anybody doing anything to this card that is going to do anything besides banish it are incredibly low. Next up, just for those cheeky little aggro matchups or dealing with things like Ariel in the Steel Song matchup, if they don't have songs to deal with your Rafiki, is going to be Rafiki, a 1-cost inkable character, 0/2 stat line, questing for 1, challenger 3, so it's going to be a 3/2 when it's challenging, hence dealing with things like Ariel. And whenever he challenges a hyena character, this character takes no damage from the challenge. This used to be kind of an irrelevant ability, but people are playing Bonsai and Emerald now, so there is a potential that you are getting an attack into something like Bonsai and you're killing it without taking any damage. Next up in the 1-cost slot, just because Diablo is better doesn't mean we are no longer playing Magic Broom. We are on 2 of these. We have reduced quite a bit due to things like Diablo existing, but he's a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line, questing for 1. Think of it in a deck where you're less focused on hyper aggro and more focused on drawing. You still probably play 4 of these, but whenever you play another character, you may banish this character to draw a card. So ideally you want to play him, quest with him once, play another character, banish him to draw a card, and then ideally play an additional character that your opponent's not going to be able to deal with. Next up, we are on 1 Chernobog's Followers, just to kind of mix it up. Sometimes if you're playing a variety of cards, you can make your opponent think you are going to have more than one of them in the deck, when in reality you don't, so maybe they play a little bit differently. Chernobog's Followers isn't necessarily a big one to play around, but we still squeeze 1 in there. He is a 1-cost inkable 2/1 stat line, so potentially some trades in the early game with some of those small characters, questing for 1, and his ability is a little bit different than Magic Brooms, with whenever this character quests, you may banish them to draw a card. So you don't have the caveat of needing to play another character to banish him, but you also can't get his ability trigger within the same turn that he comes into play, when you may want to do something like that. Next up, still in the 1-cost slot, and jumping into the first of our uninkables, we are on 4 Daisy Duck Donald's Date, a 1-cost uninkable character, 1/4 stat line, questing for 2, with the ability Big Prize. Whenever this character quests, each opponent is going to reveal the top card of their deck. If it's a character, they get to go ahead and put it into their hand. If it is not a character, however, it ships to the bottom of their deck, so great way to potentially, so she is super good in the Steel Song matchup due to the 4 defense, and she's also very good in the Sapphire matchup because usually they have a lot of items, songs, and other stuff that isn't characters, and you have a really high potential to hit something that's not a character and give them no additional value off of Daisy. Next up, we are on 4 Maleficent Biding Her Time. You know her, you love her, all the way back to chapter 1. Still a great card as far as I'm concerned. She is a 1-cost uninkable 1/1 stat line, questing for 2. That's all there is to it. She is just a super aggressive lore threat. And not going to spend a lot of time talking about this one because we are also on 4 Lilo Making a Wish. Exact same thing as Maleficent, but she's Amber. Just keeping that lore pressure on. Last card in the 1-drop slot is going to be an action, and that is going to be Befuddle, a 1-cost inkable action, return chosen character or item with cost 2 or less to their player's hand. The item part isn't really relevant to the meta right now. Maybe it'll be relevant down the line, but right now the thing that is very relevant is the ability to bounce a character to their player's hand, both on your characters and on your opponent's characters. You could potentially use this to keep the board clear on your opponent's side so you can continue to quest in unimpeded, or you could potentially use this to bounce one of your own characters, or if it's a little further into the turns of the game, and then play it back ready so you you can avoid your opponent being able to challenge into it. One thing you do not need to avoid your opponent challenging into is going to be 4 Simba Protective Cub, a 2-cost inkable character, 2/3 stat line, questing for 1. Card that's fallen out of favor a little bit. I think when you're running this many 1-drops, 4 Lilos and 4 Maleficents especially, as well as the other squishies in the 1-drop slot, Simba Protective Cub is really good, and it can potentially trade with some things in the meta. It's not going to trade into things like Fox or Snake, unfortunately, but it is still definitely relevant against some of those early game threats. He is a 2/3 stat line, questing for 1, and he has Bodyguard, hence protecting your other characters. If he is exerted, your opponent's characters must challenge him. You'll see some more Bodyguards for sure. Next up in the 2-drop slot, kind of on the same wavelength as Befuddle, we are on 3 Madam Mim Snake, a 2-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1, and when you play this character, banish her or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. It's not only a pretty good ability, it's a good way to go ahead and get characters from your side of the board back into your hand and back onto the field ready again, especially when you have so many 1-drops. Then we are on 2 Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain, a 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line, questing for 1, but when you have more than 2 characters in play, he's going to be questing for 3. He dies to pretty much everything in the Ruby and Steel matchups. However, he is very squishy, and not being able to even get 1 quest in with him doesn't feel great, so we are only on 2 instead of 4. Some of these deck lists play 4. I don't think 4 is necessarily where you want to be. It's a similar reason I'm not playing Pinocchio. But jumping over to some 3-cost cards, we are on 3 The White Rose, a 3-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1, and when you play this character, gain 1 lore. Potentially going to be a great way to close out the game and to be a very relevant lore threat. She is also a 3/3 stat line, which is very good. And also in the 3-cost slot, we're on 3 Donald Duck Musketeer Soldier, a 3-cost inkable 2/3 stat line, questing for 1 with Bodyguard. So same as Simba, you'd say, why do you play a 3-cost when you have the 2-cost Simba, exact same stat line, and has Bodyguard? Well, it's because of that second ability. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore this turn. So if you're going turn 1, quester for 2, turn 2, 2 questers for 2, and then turn 3 this, you're already potentially having quested in for 9 going into the 3rd turn of the game. And our last Bodyguard in the deck, we are on 3 Blue von Brunwald the 13th. I may be pronouncing that terrible. It is a 3-cost uninkable 0/3 stat line, questing for 1. Does have Bodyguard, doesn't deal any damage. Again, you may say, why would you play an uninkable 0/3? Seems crazy. It's because of that extra ability, and that's when this character is banished, gain 2 lore. Your opponent is very unlikely to do something like Hades or Let It Go to this character, so more likely than not he's going to be getting banished, and he can potentially close you out that game. It is worth noting it doesn't have to be during your opponent's turn or anything. You could potentially challenge with your own blue, let him get banished, and gain the 2 lore that way. Next up, a card from the new set, we are on 2 Tiana Restaurant Owner, a 3-cost uninkable character, 1/4 stat line, which is pretty good stat line. Keeps out of the range of some stuff, definitely doesn't save it from things like Brawl, but Brawl's definitely been seeing less play in the meta. Does die to things like Sisu. It's a bit of a bummer in that Ruby Sapphire matchup, hence why we are only on 2 of them, but she is a 1/4 character, questing for 2. Whenever a character of yours is challenged, while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 strength this turn unless the player pays 3 ink, which is pretty crazy, especially considering it comes down on 3, which is pretty crazy. It comes down on 3, and it does also affect itself, so going into turn 4, if you can get this character exerted, it's going to make it a lot harder for your opponent to deal with your board. Next up, as far as I'm concerned, a major Amethyst staple, and that is going to be 4 Madam Mim Fox, a 3-cost inkable 4/3 stat line, questing for 1, and when you play this character, banish her or return chosen character of yours to your hand. Definitely, like I mentioned before, can be a benefit to a deck like this where you're able to get something potentially readied on the board again as opposed to letting it get banished. And it does have Rush, so it's going to be able to deal with those threats that are getting in your way to keep the board clear for your little squishy guys who want to quest for a bunch. Just another potential way to get some card draw. We are on 3 libraries. It is a 3-cost inkable, so if it is not great in the matchup that you're in, go ahead and ink it. It's super good into things like Steel Song because they're going to have a much easier time removing your characters than they are removing an 8 willpower location. So the library can be very good in that matchup. It is going to be earning you a static lore at the beginning of every turn, which definitely helps rack up that lore. Whenever a character is banished, well, here you're going to draw a card and just continue to fuel that board. Like I mentioned, in that Steel Song matchup, they're going to have a much easier time getting rid of your characters than getting rid of this, and that means if you get your characters inside of here, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Card that's fallen out of favor a little bit in the meta right now because of the new Genie Wish Fulfilled is going to be Merlin Rabbit. We are on 2 of them, a 4-cost uninkable character, 2/3 stat line, questing for 1. When it comes into play and when it leaves play, you're going to go ahead and draw a card. So its stat line is a little bit weaker. It's not evasive. It quests for less, but that additional card draw I do think still puts you on to Merlin Rabbit. However, even though we're on 2 Merlin Rabbit, we are on 3 Genie Wish Fulfilled, a 4-cost uninkable 2/4 stat line, questing for 2, so better stat line, better questing ability, has evasive, so it's going to be harder for your opponents to deal with, and when you play this character, draw a card. Super good combination of abilities and stat line. Definitely one of the best cards on the new meta. Something that I think could potentially lead to Brawl becoming more relevant again. And the last card in the deck, we are on 4 Merlin Goat, a 4-cost inkable, 4/3 stat line, questing for 1, but when you play him and when he leaves play, you're going to go ahead and gain a lore. Great way to close out those games, much like those Baloos, potentially going to be netting you 2 lore. If it gets to quest, potentially going to be netting you even more lore, but Merlin Goat is still a staple in the meta, still a fantastic card. I think this build of Hyper Aggro is a lot of fun. It's very aggressive. It is a little bit risky on the uninkable count, but you want to take that into consideration when you're going into your mulligan. If you have inkables that aren't relevant to the early game, as opposed to using them as a way to mulligan, maybe go ahead and ink those cards. White Rose, Merlin Goat, they're great cards to close out a game, but you don't necessarily need them in that starting hand, but you do want to get out those Lilos, Daisy Ducks, stuff like that. So maybe keep those in the mulligan other cards that are uninkable to try to draw those early game uninkables. But that is the full deck list. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments below. Do you think it's great? Do you think I should have played different cards? Do you think there should have been 4 Genie Wish Fulfilled in this list? Do you think I should reduce the uninkable count overall and I'm crazy for playing 22 uninkables? The deck has been working pretty good, honestly. But as always, I love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you're playing Hyper Aggro in these colors, I'd love to see your list. If you're playing Hyper Aggro in different colors, I would love to compare notes, see if maybe there's a better color combination for Hyper Aggro in the current meta. But as always, thank you for sticking around to the end. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and when you see those toys, video games, and the weirdly expensive rare Genie Wish Fulfilled off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.